middle part of the exam or not, the big question or not. But just the fact that it always winds up there is very surprising to me. It's like a very sort of like now predictable pattern, which is really odd. Anyway, nonetheless, if you wound up over here, good for you. Good job, folks. You earned some solid grades on the exam. You're doing a good job overall, and you should continue doing what you're doing. I'm going to assume that those of you that did wind up here wound up there last time as well. But I did see some strong comebacks, which I always like to see, which is a good thing. So that always makes me feel good. So congratulations on those of you that did bounce back. But certainly congratulations to those of you that have been operating at this level throughout the entire semester, because you should be commended. Like, obviously, you know what you're doing the right thing, you're going to continue doing it, and that is going to continue beyond college, and it's going to lead you down very, very good roads in the long run. If you wound up in the middle, you made it through, folks. You made it through. You passed the exam. You're going to likely pass the course if you continue with this kind of performance. But as I said before, life is not curved. We are curved here because, again, I'm not going to fail the majority of the class. That would be absurd. But, you know, when you get out there, you are going to be competing against everybody, and there's a lot of very high functioning, and by functioning, I mean very highly dedicated and motivated people that are ready and willing to take the good opportunities from you. And so you really need to step up your game as far as like how much you're willing to dedicate to the things that you take on. You can do better. I know you can do better. You probably know you can do better. I'm going to assume that some of you don't know you can do better. Some of you are just intimidated by classes like this, and you just kind of allow that intimidation to kind of mar the entire experience for you, and that creates your own sort of barrier to succeed in your head, where you just kind of stop yourself from putting in the right kind of dedication because you actually believe that that will lead to nothing because you're incapable of doing well in a class like this, and that is absurd. You are all capable of doing exceptionally well in a class like this. You're all capable of doing exceptionally well at everything, as exceptionally well as most people do at most things that they do. And all you have to realize at some point, and ideally you'll realize it while you're here, that it's just a function of how much time you put into what you do. That, you know, you have to sacrifice the other things to be able to, you know, be able to take on like large amounts of information that are foreign to you, that you aren't normally used to thinking about, that aren't intuitive. You know, like it's not stuff that you can just like think through on your own and bam, there it is. It's like, no, it's taking on a different way of thinking about things. It takes time to do that. It takes time to then be able to, you know, demonstrate that you have understood that and do well on exams and then whatever. So change what you're doing. Change the approach. I think there's some of you that, I don't think it's the majority of you, but there is a group that really quite hasn't figured out what it takes to do well in the more challenging aspects of life, including like classes like this, etc., where you just have to sit down for however long it takes to figure things out in order for you to do well in them. And that just requires making the thing that you take on to be your priority, and for you to accept that and deprioritize everything else. So the other things that you do that maybe you do to escape, you know, just the turbulent nature of life, which is very turbulent, and life is not perfect, and we're all in it. We're all in it together. There's ups and downs, and that's just the nature of life. And it can be a little much sometimes, especially when you're in school and you're doing all these other things that are overwhelming you. Maybe you're not doing as well in some things as you'd like to be, and then there's all the life stuff on top of that, and you just like want to just shut down. So you like, you know, you give yourself over to like video games and hanging out with friends and TV or whatever it is that you do. And there's nothing wrong with doing any of those things. In fact, everybody should do the things that they enjoy, because we have to be balanced in our lives. We're not robots. We have to have a balance between the things that we take on and the things that we can enjoy. But like there has to be a realization that those things need to be like chosen to be done at the right times. You can't let feelings of like stress and pressure and life so overwhelm you to the point where you just like don't care about the things you've taken on and just want to escape to the things that give you pleasure momentarily and don't ultimately lead to much more. Again, it's about balance, and you haven't quite reached it. I'm not saying that if you're in this category, you are just like damaged and you need to fix yourself. But there are some people that still haven't quite figured out how all of this works, so that you can be up here, so that you can have a fighting chance in a class like this, and ultimately in life. Because, like I said, like out there, it's not just going to be your fellow CSUN students that you're going to be competing against. It's going to be everybody from every walk of life, from every university, all sorts of degrees of dedication and endurance when it comes to the things that they take on. Some of those people are already here. There's some people like that in this class, and I acknowledge it, and I'm very happy about that. And there's certainly a lot of them at CSUN as well. But you will see that obviously when you go to like the top tier universities, the Ivy Leagues, the UCLAs, etc., you're going to get a higher proportion of people in those places that are of that quality of like they take something on and that is what they do. Like they do that. Like it's all about doing their best at the things that they take on, and everything else comes secondary to it. In fact, those other things may not even be important at all. It may just be the things that they take on that will define who they are and what they do. And it's a mentality. It's something that you kind of, it's not something that you just like force yourself to do. It's like a result of an outlook on life, a perspective. And it's about kind of like unlearning a lot of what you maybe have already learned, that kind of leads you to have like these patterns of like just like being kind of okay with like, just doing like sort of a mediocre level, kind of a mid-level where you're just like okay with just getting by. It's a kind of doing a reflective overall analysis of like how you think about things and where those thought patterns came from. And they generally come from like your development and like the long time that you spend in high school, where you have a very controlled set of circumstances where it's very inhibiting, and you're trying to make it through, and like and really like one of the best responses you have is to react to things, right? Like you're just like reacting to things rather than being proactive. You're just kind of like reacting to the fact that there's like all sorts of authority figures trying to control your lives, including your parents, and like all these rules. And then ultimately when you get out of that, you like want to, you've broken free, and now you're like, yes, I'm not in that same sort of situation, so now I get to enjoy my life a little bit more. But that sort of mentality of like reacting to things is something you've carried with you, and it's a matter of like undoing sort of your conditioning that led you to have that mentality, and then actively kind of reprogramming yourself to kind of view things completely differently than you already view them. And that will allow you to make better choices about what you should be doing at any given time. But again, there's a lot of sort of like default behavior that we fall into, especially at the part of your lives that a lot of you are at, post-college in your early 20s, where again, it's like you haven't quite taken enough time to reflect enough on like how life has affected you and sort of shaped you, and taken enough control of yourself to be able to then say, I want to stop being this person and stop making these kind of choices and make the better choices. So that's, again, it's like a self-reflective process. It takes time. It's something that you have to actively be working on every single day. It's not something that you just like flip a switch and it's like, there it is, I got it. It's something that you constantly need to be working on. But the thing that is most important, the thing that ideally will be the catalyst for you to actually make that kind of change, is for you to know, not just think, but know that you can be better. You can operate at the highest levels. You can be as successful as the most successful people are, both in your classes and in the world. You can be those people. You can actually be as good as them, get the things in life that they will get, and that also that you deserve those things. That you are worthy of those things. So you need to first come to that realization. And ideally, if you do that, then you'll start to work through the silliness that kind of stops you from just having a clear mind about what you're doing at any given moment, and decide the right thing for yourself. Decide, today I'm going to dedicate the entire day to learning, everything I learned in my classes. And then if I have some leftover time, I'll play my video games. I'll go hang out with my significant other. I'll go hang out with friends, etc. That is the approach you need to take. And again, it's something that requires you sort of taking control of yourself, taking control of these impulses that you may have that are perfectly natural, given the experiences that we all have in this very specific society we all grow up in. But again, they're not necessarily a permanent prison. That we can break free, and we can grow and be better, and all of you can, and all of you can be better, and I want you to be, because I want you to succeed. I want all of this to mean something, because as I've mentioned before, the way the world is structured now, you can get a degree and it may ultimately wind up meaning nothing. You may get out there and say, hey, look, I've got a degree. And they'll say, okay, well, come on in. Here's a job. And then you get in there, and then what? Are you willing to dedicate yourself, for hours on end to figure things out? Are you willing to push the boundaries of the understanding of what your firm does in order to maybe innovate and maybe impress those people that will give you further opportunities? Or are you just going to flounder? Are you just going to go in there and just, again, continue to do the bare minimum? At any moment that you should be doing things, not doing those things. Out there in the world, it is a cold and heartless world if you have that kind of behavior. If you exhibit that type of behavior, the world is very, very ready to just forget about you, throw you off to the side, and just not give a crap about you. And you have to not let that happen to you. You have to turn this around. You have to make this mean something, because if not, you're going to be checking off all the classes you have to take, second year, third year, got my degree, and then what, And then you'll be very disappointed, you'll be very bitter. And then there is also, the whole thing of the youth part of it. Youth has value, and that eventually goes away. And so that extra safety net that the majority of you have goes away. And so all of a sudden, once that's gone, the world starts to treat you even worse than you're already treated. And the only thing that changes all of it, that changes every single adverse effect that this world can have on an individual, is the value that you create inside of yourself, and your willingness and ability to assert that value in any situation, be it in a workplace or in any other kind of situation that you might find yourself in. And again, that is something that you kind of build up here. If you dedicate yourself hours on end to doing exceptionally well at everything that you do here, then you become used to it, and then that dedication shapes you. It turns you into the person that becomes sort of a magnet for opportunities and good things. Good people treat you well because of it. They treat you with respect. They want you around. Obviously, there's all these other dimensions to life, like gender, race, class, etc. that will always play a role in our lives, and will serve to kind of marginalize us and put us in a box of you're not good enough. And so that's where it becomes even more important for you to build as much value as possible inside of yourself, so you can transcend those limitations that society is very, very willing to impose on you. And again, it happens here. This is the opportunity to do that. And every moment counts. Every exam counts. Every class counts. Every day counts. And to be successful in the long run, you have to be conscious of how the things you do now affect that sort of long path you might have. The fact that you are on a path, this is a stepping stone on a long path, not just a moment that I'm trying to get through, and just I hope it works out. It's no, it's life. It's a series of moments, and it's very much characterized by cause and effect. If you cause the good things to happen, then you'll have good effects. If not, then it can be just a snowball effect down, the wrong hill towards unpleasantness. It's just, it's like this always happens, and I always give these speeches, and like I know some people are listening to me. I know there's always some people that listen to me, and some people do come later to me and tell me, yeah, hey, you woke me up a bit, and that's a good thing. But in the end, like none of this ultimately matters. What matters is you. Like what matters is what's going on inside of you, how much you're actually willing to care about yourself, the things that you do, and like your overall life. Like if things are going well for you right now, I hope they continue going well. But like again, like you have to acknowledge that like you're gonna get older, and eventually like all that you're gonna have left, that the only thing you'll have left is like who you've developed inside of yourself. That's it. So if you're not working really hard to making the best possible person you can possibly make, that again will transcend your looks, it will transcend your gender, your race, your class. Then if you're not doing that, then you're gonna get a wake up call at some point, and it's not going to be pleasant, folks. It's not going to be pleasant. And I don't want that to happen to you. So work harder. Like work harder. You can work harder, and all of you know it. It's not okay to know, oh hey, well there's a curve in the class, and like he's got practice exams, so I'm not going to do anything for most of the time, and then right before the exam I'm going to maybe read that practice exam a few times, and like maybe I'll spend a little bit of time looking at the book, but not really. I'll just try to learn everything from that practice exam. Like, I mean, that's like a shortcut that may or may not work depending on how many other people have that same mentality. But again, like that you're really just you're shortcutting yourself. Like in high school, yeah, shortcuts were fun and effective, and it's always fun to get away with stuff in high school, but like you're not getting away with anything here. At all. Like there's like nobody's forcing you to be here. You're deciding to be here. And so if you're taking that kind of approach, then you're just deciding to hurt yourself. And that's it. That's it. Because you're not hurting me. Because this always happens. So it's like if I were to let this bother me, then I would be a very damaged person. So for me, I'm like, all right, well, it is what it is. At least I've got some people in this class that care, and therefore I'm here for them. But I'm here for everyone because I want all of you to change. But the people that are actually dedicated to doing well in this class and demonstrating it, that for me, that's enough. But for you, like again, like it has to mean more to you. It has to mean more to you, or else it will be meaningless. Not just in terms of like how you view it right now, but like in terms of how society views your degree, and all this time you would have spent here, will mean nothing. It will mean nothing, and it will be unfortunate. If you wound up down here, I don't know what to say. I mean, as you can see, like a 30, like will kind of get you a pass given this curve here. So if you wound up down here, like I mean, you're basically not doing anything. Like you're basically not doing a thing, and I just don't understand it. Like I see it every time, and every time I don't understand it. Like I don't get it. I don't personally understand how that can be the case. Like like I said last time, I might have said it last time. Like you don't go out and buy something really valuable and then like just like shove it down the toilet. Like you don't do that. Like you buy something valuable and you like take care of it. Like you nurture it. Like you spent money on it. Like. That's what you're doing here. You're buying something. You're paying for it, right? You're paying for your education. You have chosen to be here. Nobody's forcing you to be here. You are paying money to be here, and you are just kind of flushing this whole experience down the toilet. And again, it's puzzling to me. Like you really need to do some like really hard reflection on like what it is you're doing here. Like if you're going to be here and not do a thing, then why are you here? And I want you to be here, and it is good for you to be here because you need a college degree to even have a fighting chance in this world anymore. So therefore, you should want to earn your degree. But if you're going to engage in this process and then do nothing, then it's like conflict. The logic, it just doesn't make any sense. I can't even. It drives me nuts. Like trying to even think about it. I can't. Like I've never done that. I had one bad semester in college. I had transferred to USC. I was still living in the Valley. I was working full time, and I was commuting, and that just wasn't working. I just didn't have enough time to do it. Like I had a bad semester. I had to drop out that semester, And then I quit my job. I took out student loans. I moved to downtown, and then I got straight A's from that point forward. Like, I acknowledged that, like, you know, I was taking on too much. I was trying to accomplish too much, and I made the right adjustments, and it worked out, you know. And it was just like a one-time thing. But like, I'm thinking that like certain people that are just kind of just consistently winding up down here, like you're not just real. You're not like in a weird position. You're just kind of used to that. And again, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you need to make it make sense. And how you make it make sense is by actually trying here and doing something, anything, to try to, you know, at least move your way up, or even. But this is really where you want to be, because like everything I just said, like, the point is to be up here, because if you are up here, then you are demonstrating to yourself what you're capable of, and then you're creating that track record for yourself of like these accomplishments that will then create that momentum that'll get you moving forward in life, where again, you won't need to fake anything once you get out there. Like, it'll be very clear and transparent to like employers, or if you're going to start your own business, like customers, like, you are worth their time. You are worth their time, and you are worth their respect, and you are worth opportunities, and you are worth everything that this world has to offer. So like, if you're not engaging in this process to have that end goal, then you have to like completely sort of rethink exactly what it is that you are doing here, and ideally you will, and things will turn around for you. I hope it happens. I hope it happens. I mean, like, I've gotten a lot of degrees, and I told you guys last time, like that Mark Cuban helped me. Like, other people approach me all the time about opportunities. Like, I have all sorts of opportunities now. Like, I could do all sorts of things, and all I see is like opportunity in my life. Like, I see just promise, you know, like, just onwards and upwards is all that is going to happen for me. And again, that's a function of what I've put into my life and the amount of dedication that I was willing to have for the things that I took on. And so therefore, I am evidence that there is a clear formula on like how you are able to achieve the things you want in this world, and ultimately be happy in this world, like be content with this world. I'm very close to turning 40, and like, I'm thinking about my life, and I'm like very proud of the way I've lived. I'm very happy with my life. I'm overall like just happy, and I think that's what you all want. Like, you want to be, you know, at the middle of your life, later in your life, and just be able to at any moment think about what's going on and think, you know what, I like how things are going. I love my life. You know, like, that is success. That is success. And it's really easy for this world to take that from you, like, very easily. Just take it, and then it's gone forever. So, you know, just don't let that happen to you. Don't let this world take you down, because it will. It will take you down, and it will forget about you, and it will not think twice about it. So you know, take it back. Take this world back for yourselves. Make this mean something. And you know, whatever, exams, whatever, this class, who cares, right? In the end, like, you know, we all live, we all die. In the end, the earth will blow up at some point, and it won't mean anything. But, you know, like, you know, we're here, like 40, 60, 80 years. Like, while we're here, like, let's make the most of it, right? Let's make the best of it, you know, for yourselves. All right. I'll pass back the exams at the end of the class. And as I said, there's still some opportunities to have a strong finish in the class. I don't curve the final exam itself. I curve the final grades. So I'll take your score out of 20. I'm sorry, take your score out of 100, multiply that by the 20% that it's worth, add that to your overall score, and then I'll curve the entire class. And then I'll have like brackets for the entire class. So don't depend on a curve. Don't try to calculate what you need on the exam to just kind of make it by, because there's no way to actually do that. Because again, it's all very relative. It depends on how your classmates do. So just do your absolute best. If you have a strong showing in the final, then that will add more in terms of points relative to everyone else. So you can actually have a big impact on your final grade by doing exceptionally well in the final. So that's an opportunity there. And of course, the paper is an opportunity to knock out some points that you just basically need to just be okay in the class. But again, like the paper itself will not pass you. Like, you must pass exams. If you're not passing exams, you're not passing the class. So just keep that in mind. Are there any questions you'd like me to address? All right. Yeah, just a reminder, I think I already mentioned it, but I'm not going to be here on Tuesday at all day, so no office hours, no class. I'll see you guys Thursday the next time. All righty. So now we are going to start talking about oligopoly, which is the market setting where there are a few firms that dominate the market and have large market shares. And so they are faced with a couple of dilemmas. One is that they share a downward sloping demand curve. So if there's only one firm in the market, a monopolist, they are the market, and the demand curve is the demand that they face, right? If you're a perfectly competitive firm, the market sets the price for you. Your demand is set at that price, so your perspective on the market gives you a perfectly elastic demand curve that is set at a price. And you can sell as much as you want at that price, but you are a price taker. You cannot affect the price based on your output decision. Obviously, that's not the case with a monopolist. A monopolist, if they want to supply more, they have to lower the price as they have to, again, move along their demand curve. In a market where there's a few firms with large market shares dominating the market, they share that demand curve. And so if one firm wants to increase their output, they'll move the entire market along the demand curve. And that means that everybody needs to take that into consideration. So there's interdependence in decision making. The decisions that firms make in order to optimize their behavior is not just dependent on their own costs and the demand, but also on what their rivals are doing. Because I'm expanding my output, we're moving the entire market down the demand curve. That means that that the price has now been lowered, and everybody needs to lower their price, or they will be priced out of the market. So others will lower their price by expanding their output as well, and that will then in turn affect my decision. I will now have to take into consideration the fact that they responded to what I did, and so I will need to respond to that. So there's this interdependence in decision making. You always have to be thinking about what your rivals are doing, or else if you're not, you're going to be hurt in these markets. And therefore, firms in these markets need to think about a lot more than just what a monopolist would think about or a perfectly competitive firm would think about when they're making their decisions, which is what complicates the analysis, which is why we have different approaches to sort of trying to best figure out how firms can operate in these markets. We have different models that deal with different possible oligopoly situations, which we'll cover in chapter 13. But one approach that we use is called game theory. Game theory is an approach to strategic behavior. So it's a modeling approach that is used when there is interdependence in decision making. It doesn't necessarily have to be specific to economics. It can be applied in a variety of fields. The biology field tends to use game theory when they study sort of predator-prey relationships and equilibriums in environments with respect to like what populations dominate. Also during the Cold War era, we use game theory to kind of maneuver our way through the complexities of the Cold War, where the Soviet Union and the U.S., as y'all know, we kind of split the world up after the Second World War based on ideological grounds, right? They were communists, we were free market, and so because we did win the war, we both kind of had influence over the world. We had different parts of the world that we had influence over their economies, and some turned out to be market economies, others turned out to be communist, and sometimes those ideas met in some sort of battlefield. But although the U.S. and the Soviet Union were never directly engaged in war, So it wasn't a hot war, right? Like we were always kind of in there indirectly, which is what characterized this like Cold War situation that we were in. And as we all know, nuclear weapons were developed during the Second World War, and the secrets got out after we developed them here, and then the Soviets developed them, and then our nuclear arsenals proliferated. People thought that they needed to build the biggest, best arsenals in order to dominate, and so that created the threat of nuclear annihilation, which obviously is a bad thing. And so, several scientists in the U.S., like including this guy named John Nash, kind of got together and decided they're going to use game theory to kind of try to figure out how to best work through this Cold War era. And then, so they did ultimately figure something out. And it was partly based on using this approach. And it winds up being intuitive, but again, the world is not necessarily intuitive, and so that's why there's experts to be able to provide like formal analysis to support certain claims that, although might be intuitive, people are not generally likely to engage in on their own. So they need experts to kind of tell them this is the right thing to do. So that's what game theory kind of helped us do. It kind of helped us survive nuclear annihilation. But I'll talk more about it when we get to the section that actually deals with the type of games that reflect that era. And that's actually the next lecture. So that'll be on Thursday of next week when I do the second part of the chapter. So here in this part of the chapter, we're just going to kind of lay the groundwork for how game theory works, and then look at a very specific type of games that kind of help us to understand the way that oligopolies are sometimes sort of forced to kind of play games in terms of like the way they compete. And so you may or may not remember the prisoner's dilemma situation that sort of mirrors what an oligopoly goes through. It's a very classic sort of story that is used to explain the situation, sort of allegory, story as metaphor. That I'll go over here as well. But like a lot of these ideas were introduced to you in your introductory micro courses, so you might have some understanding of this stuff already. Anyway, I'll cover that today as well in this first section. So let's do an introduction to the theory of games. But first, briefly talk about what an oligopoly is. So oligopoly refers to a situation where there's relatively few large firms in an industry, each one having a good amount of market power and a decent sized market share. And again, there's interdependence in their decisions. There's no explicit number of firms required for an oligopoly, but sometimes, well, most of the time it'll fall within like 2 to 10, with increasing numbers leading to more competitive situations. Ultimately, the converging limit is the perfectly competitive market. So as there are more and more firms in these industries, the markets tend to converge to perfectly competitive outcomes. But what's stopping the markets from converging to that situation is, of course, barriers to entry. The same kind of things that exist that allow a monopoly to be the sole firm in an industry will keep other firms out in an oligopoly setting, but obviously they're not going to be stringent enough to keep all firms out. Certain firms will be able to enter these markets. The products the firms offer may be identical, as in a perfectly competitive market, or they could also be differentiated, like in a monopolistically competitive market. An oligopoly composed of only 2 firms is known as a duopoly, and that's generally the case that we'll look at in this class, a duopoly. All right, so as we know, firms can land in any one of these settings. We haven't talked about monopolistic competition yet. I think that's the next chapter. So monopolistic competition is sort of a hybrid between perfect competition and monopoly, in which there is competition, but firms have market power as well. And there are no barriers to entry, so there's zero economic profits in the long run. So it has characteristics of perfect competition and monopoly. and it's a more competitive setting than oligopoly. There's a lot more firms here than there are here. Again, here generally 2 to 10 roughly. But both of these two settings do fall under the category of imperfect competition, where firms compete and have market power. So they compete against other firms, but they are able to charge prices above their marginal cost. They're not forced to charge their marginal costs. Only under extreme circumstances are they able to do that. Are they forced to do that? All right, so game theory is the area of study of games dealing with any situation in which the reward or payoff to any player depends on not only her own actions, but the actions of her rival as well. In the game, the players are the individuals who make decisions. So if we're talking about firms, we're talking about firm managers. The planned decisions of the players are their strategies. So if they plan to charge a high price versus a low price, either charging a high price or a low price are the two possible strategies. The payoffs to the players are the profits or the losses that result from the strategies. And due to the interdependence, again, the fact that they have to take into consideration not just what they do, but what their opponents do, the payoff to a player depends not only on that player's strategy, but on the strategies employed by other players. In the analysis of games, the order in which the decisions are made is important. So you might have players making moves at the same time and therefore not being able to react to what their opponent does, in which case you're playing a simultaneous move game. Each player makes decisions without knowledge of the other player's decisions. Or you might have a situation where a player can move first and then the other players respond to that. And so in that case, you have a sequential move game. So one player makes a move after observing the other player's move. In the context of oligopoly games, if two firms must set prices without knowledge of each other's decisions, it is a simultaneous move game. If one firm sets prices after observing its rival's price, it is a sequential move game. Now, games can be played only one time or they can be played repeatedly. So if they're played one time, it's called the one-shot game. And if it's played repeatedly, it's called a repeated game. And that changes the outcome as well, whether the game is played only once or multiple times. And whether or not the player knows when the game ends also affects the outcome. All right, so let's talk about this prisoner's dilemma that you may or may not remember. So it's a classic example using game theory to understand oligopoly decisions. So in this classic story, two prisoners are held in a cell for a serious crime that they did commit. The prosecutor, though, doesn't have enough evidence to convict them fully just of a minor offense. So based on the evidence that they have, each prisoner will only get a year in jail. Each prisoner is put into separate cells, and they are told that if one confesses while the other remains silent, then the confessor will go free while the other will have to spend 20 years in prison. If they both wind up confessing, then they will both get intermediate sentences of 5 years. So if they keep their mouths shut, essentially work together because they had agreed prior to committing the crime, if they get caught, that they wouldn't rat each other out. If they work together and not rat each other out, then they'll get the least amount of sentence there. If they cheat on each other's agreement, then both of them will wind up with worse situations than if they had kept their mouths shut and worked together. But if only one of them cheats and the other one doesn't, the one that cheats winds up benefiting the most, and the one that gets cheated on gets screwed eventually. Essentially, 20 years is terrible compared to 1 year. And again, the two prisoners are not allowed to communicate with one another. So we can set up the situation that these players are in, again, where their decisions are dependent on what their rivals are going to do, right? The prisoners are dependent on what the other prisoner is going to say or not say. We can set up that situation as what's called a normal form representation of a game that indicates the players of the game, the possible strategies of the game, and the payoffs to the player that will result from alternative strategies. A normal form is set up as a payoff matrix that has columns and rows. A payoff matrix represents the interdependence of players via their strategies and payoffs. So here we've got prisoner X. Prisoner X has either of two strategies. She can either remain silent or confess. And then we have prisoner Y, who can either remain silent or confess as well. So these are the strategies for prisoner Y, represented by the columns. These are the strategies for prisoner X, represented by the rows. If they both remain silent and cooperate with each other, then they'll wind up with only 1 year in prison each. So the payoff on the left corresponds to prisoner X, and the payoff on the right corresponds to prisoner Y in each of these cells in this payoff matrix. If they both confess and cheat on each other, then they both wind up with 5 years. If only prisoner X remains silent and prisoner Y decides to confess, then prisoner X will wind up with 20 years and prisoner Y winds up with 0 years. And the game is symmetric, and so the payoffs are going to be the same over here when prisoner X is the one confessing and prisoner Y is the one remaining silent. So prisoner X gets 0 years and prisoner Y gets 20 years. All right, so again, a game can be represented like this. This is a one-shot game in which the players make the decisions at the same time, and so this is basically what the players have to figure out what they should best do, given the nature of the game, given the incentives to both sides. So one way of sort of working through the uncertainty of a game like this is to figure out first, is there a dominant strategy for a player? Does a player have a dominant strategy? A dominant strategy is an action. An action is a dominant strategy when it is a player's best action regardless of the action taken by the other player. So if one player should do something regardless of what their opponent does, then that is a dominant strategy. So we can identify a dominant strategy by taking the perspective of a player and then considering what they should do optimally in response to both of the options, both of the strategies that their opponent has to play. So taking the perspective of prisoner X, in response to prisoner Y remaining silent, what should prisoner X do? Confess, right? Because 0 years is better than 1 year, right? So prisoner X, in response to prisoner Y remaining silent, will confess. In response to prisoner Y confessing, what should prisoner X do? Confess, right? Because again, 5 years is less than 20 years. So we can see here that regardless of what prisoner Y does, prisoner X should confess. Prisoner X has a dominant strategy to confess. And this is how we were able to identify what that dominant strategy is. And then the game is symmetric, so we can identify the same thing for prisoner Y. So taking the perspective of prisoner Y, in response to prisoner X remaining silent, again, prisoner Y can either remain silent or confess, and obviously confess is better. In response to prisoner X confessing, prisoner Y can either remain silent or confess, and obviously confess is better. So we can see that in this prisoner's dilemma, prisoner Y has the dominant strategy to confess, because regardless of what prisoner X does, it always benefits prisoner Y more to confess. So prisoner Y also has a dominant strategy to confess. And that's how we were able to identify it. All right. So this set of strategies here, where the two dominant strategies overlap, are essentially the two strategies that are likely to be played because both players have dominant strategies to play confess. So confess is therefore a set of strategies that neither player has any incentive to deviate from. Both players are likely to choose those sets of strategies. Therefore, we've identified what is called a Nash equilibrium in the game. A Nash equilibrium in game theory is an equilibrium in which each player has no incentive to deviate. So Nash comes from the name John Nash. John Nash was this mathematician, brilliant dude, worked at MIT for years, was also schizophrenic, went into a mental hospital for a while, eventually realized that the voices in his head were just him, got to go back to work for a bit, won a Nobel Prize around that time, and then died last year, unfortunately, or 2 years ago, 2015, in a car accident. He came up with the concept of a Nash equilibrium, like in his during the time he was getting his bachelor's degree, and the Nash equilibrium is the concept that wound up getting him the Nobel Prize, obviously years later. And the reason why it was so important was because it kind of changed the nature of what economists do, because it allowed us to look at situations like this where normally we would not really be certain of what the likely outcomes are and be able to identify what the likely outcomes are. So if we're able to identify Nash equilibrium, a Nash equilibrium or Nash equilibria, because there could be multiple ones, then we can give real world predictions about things that could happen in complicated situations like this. So in this situation, we have one Nash equilibrium. So this is the likely outcome for this game if everybody's behaving rationally, which we generally assume in all of our approaches. Again, rationally, when we're talking about rational, we're in economics, we mean that players are choosing the option that's going to benefit them the most. So if players are choosing the options that are going to benefit them the most, then the Nash equilibrium is likely to result in reality if this were to actually play out. And therefore, the Nash equilibrium becomes like a really powerful tool in analysis. And, it's been used in all sorts of different contexts, and it has provided more credibility to what economists do, because again, we do tend to work in the abstract, if you haven't realized by now. Like, the models tend to be a bit unrealistic with respect to actual circumstances, but again, they're meant to simplify the world, to give us some intuitive understandings of how the world works. Even though the models themselves may not be realistic, the results that they give us are valuable. If they weren't, they wouldn't be in textbooks, and we wouldn't be teaching them in these courses. But again, the models themselves are abstract. And again, this new concept, which seems very simple, did kind of revolutionize what we do, and is still a very useful tool, and it's a common sort of characteristic of a lot of the important work that's being done today. Now, like I said, games may not have just one Nash equilibrium. They might have multiple Nash equilibria. In that case, obviously, the predictions are not going to be as strong as far as what could happen, but it is a way of sort of kind of narrowing down what could happen. Like, it gives us more certainty about the likely outcomes versus saying, I have no idea. You can say, oh, well, there's these three Nash equilibria. These are the three things that are likely to happen. And then, you kind of let things play out and do your best in trying to get the best outcome. And also, a game may not have a Nash equilibrium. So it's possible that there may be no Nash equilibrium. And also, a Nash equilibrium does not require both players to have a dominant strategy. So you can have a Nash equilibrium without there being any dominant strategies, which we'll see in a second. All right, so to illustrate the analogy between the prisoner's dilemma and the problem confronting oligopolists who try to collude, let's consider two firms that are the sole providers of mineral water in a given market. So this is the thing about the oligopoly setting. Like, there's interdependence in decision making, and that is one layer of complexity that the firms face. The other one is that there is an incentive for them to work together as a monopolist, because they share the downward sloping demand curve. Like I said, they could work together, decide, hey, let's limit the output together to what a monopolist would supply, charge the monopoly price, earn the monopoly profits, which is the most profits that firms can make in a market, and then we'll split that. And obviously, that is the kind of situation that firms want to engage in. But in the world that we live in most Western nations, it is illegal to do that. It is illegal for firms to get together and rig markets and decide, hey, we're going to limit the amount of output. When firms do that, they form a cartel. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, is a cartel. They are an organization of the main oil producers from the Middle East, and they get together and they decide how much oil is going to be pumped out at any given time so that they can control the price of oil. Because these are governments engaging in international transactions, they are not beholden to any sort of domestic laws. So therefore, the laws that we have in this country and most Western countries that stop firms from being able to do that don't apply in that situation. So they are a legal cartel in a sense. Anyway, so firms want to do that. They want to do that. They cannot do it. They cannot get together and make these agreements. But sometimes they do it anyway, right? Like they still will get together and form agreements behind closed doors illegally. Sometimes they get caught. Sometimes they go to prison. Sometimes they don't, and that's just the way things work in the world. But one thing that does stop them from forming these agreements is the fact that once they form these agreements, there's no way to legally enforce the agreement. So there is an incentive for them to say, hey, let's get together and raise prices and lower the amount of output. And then once they leave their meetings, one of them can say, hey, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to actually expand output, lower the price, sell more than my rival, price them out of the market, and win, So there's an incentive to cheat on the agreements, essentially. And so that is a situation that the prisoner's dilemma is meant to sort of mirror. And I'll talk about why in a second. But let's consider, again, a market where there's two firms and they can collude. Collusion is working together. So they can collude and limit the amount of output in the market and rig the price. So let's say that they do decide to do that. They have a inverse demand function, P equals 20 minus Q, that they face, and they decide to approach it as a monopolist would together. And so, of course, to set their optimal output, they look at their marginal revenue. Here we're going to assume that each firm can produce mineral water from its own spring at zero marginal cost, just to keep the analysis simple. So marginal cost is equal to zero. So again, they're going to set marginal revenue equal to marginal cost. Suppose the two firms are considering a collusive agreement under which each produces half the monopoly output and offers it for sale at the monopoly price. So to figure out what that monopoly output would be, again, you take the inverse demand function, double the slope, set that equal to marginal cost, and then solve for the output. In this case, it would be 10 units. So 10 units is the monopoly output. So therefore, each firm would wind up supplying 5 units. And plugging 10 into our inverse demand function gets us to a price of $10, which will maximize profits in the market. So if the firms enter into and abide by the agreement, each will sell 5 units at a price of $10 with the economic profits of $50 each. But there's, again, no guarantee that they will honor the agreement. So we can look at the situation once again via this normal form representation of the game and highlight the parallels between this and the prisoner's dilemma. So again, we have two firms. So this is player, generally in these type of normal form representations, the player on the on this side that is represented, that has their strategies represented by the rows, is player 1, and then this is player 2, whose strategy is represented by the columns. So firm 1, player 1, can either cooperate, maintain this collusive agreement, charge the $10, or they can defect and charge the lower price and try to win the market. This is, of course, cheating on the agreement. And firm 2 has the same options as well. And again, this is the same situation as the prisoners were in. The prisoners could either cooperate and not cheat on each other, or one of them could cheat and do better. So if both of them were to cooperate, again, they would each charge a price of $10 and they would each make profit of $50. But let's say both of them were decided to cheat on each other, then both of them would charge a price of $9. By doing that, then they'll move the entire market down along the demand curve, and they'll both wind up making less profits than they did if they had just maintained their agreement. So much like if both firms much like both prisoners, if they cheated on each other, and they would wind up in a worse situation than they were in by getting more years, where it was 5 years that we talked about in prison, than the two firms that than if they had cooperated and just gotten the 1 year. All right, so if both firms defect, they'll end up splitting the 11 units of output sold at $9, and each will make an economic profit of $49.50. But let's say firm 2 were to cheat, charge $9, while firm 1 cooperates, charges $10. In that case, then firm 2 would wind up selling those 11 units and making a profit of $99, and firm 1 would make zero profit. Much like if one prisoner ratted out the other, then the one prisoner that does the ratting winds up with the best situation, 0 years of prison, which is the analog to this $99 in profit for the cheater here. And then, of course, the one that cooperates with the agreement, much like the prisoner that didn't rat out the accomplice, they wind up with the worst situation, which is zero profits for this one, and like however many years it was like 20 years for the one that got cheated on. And then, of course, the payoffs are symmetric, so you get the same situation if firm 2 is the one that cooperates and firm 1 is the one that chooses to cheat on the agreement. And so then once again, given the fact that the nature of the competition is the same, the nature of the game is the same, then we're going to get that same outcome where each player is going to have a dominant strategy to cheat, to defect. And so therefore the Nash equilibrium for this game will wind up being defect-defect, where the likely outcome in a situation like this is for the players to cheat on each other. So again, in response to firm 2 cooperating, firm 1 can either cooperate or defect, and obviously for firm 1, defecting 99 is better than 50, so firm 1 would choose to defect. And in response to firm 2 defecting, firm 1 can either cooperate or defect. 49.50 is better than 0, so they would choose to defect again. So no matter what firm 2 does, it always benefits firm 1 to defect, to cheat, and therefore that is their dominant strategy, to defect. And the same is the case for the other firm as well. So as this example is set up, the firms don't do much worse when they defect than when each cooperates. Firms that find it in their interest to defect once are likely to do so again, though, and so they would ultimately wind up hurting themselves a lot in the long run. Cheating again will mean an even lower price, though. So continuously cheating on each other will mean that they will keep lowering their price. So the resulting process of competitive price cutting will terminate only when price has plummeted all the way down to marginal cost. So because that is the Nash equilibrium for them to cheat in that prisoner's dilemma that the oligopolists are in, then they will always wind up cheating on each other, lowering prices, and obviously the lowest price that any firm can go is down to their marginal cost. So that is what they would wind up doing. At that point, neither firm will earn any profit at all. So the cost of failing to abide by a cooperative agreement can be high. Now, oligopolists can compete not only on price dimension, but also, let's say, through advertising. So let's look at this economic naturalist observation. Why do cigarette companies advertise too much? So the question is, why is there so much advertising in the cigarette industry? So advertising increases demand for a product in two different ways. One way is that new consumers become aware of a product and begin to consume it. That means that industry profits are increased when that kind of conversion happens, when you have a non-smoker turn into a smoker. And the other effect that advertising can have is that existing consumers will switch brands. Now, the American cigarette industry is one in which the most important effect of advertising is believed to be brand switching, because as we all know, cigarette companies cannot just like openly advertise anywhere. It's very limited. They can't advertise in places where they're likely to come in contact with younger people. So that the amount of conversion that happens via advertising is not that high, but obviously that kind of conversion tends to happen through peer influence. So really, it's the brand switching that is the main effect of advertising in this kind of industry. So the decision whether to advertise often confronts individual firms with a prisoner's dilemma. So we have firm A and firm B here. Obviously the the shape of the normal form table is a little bit different here, but it's the same principles that underlie the logic of it. You have player 1, player 2. This is player 1's potential strategies, either advertise or not advertise. Player 2, firm B, can either advertise or not advertise. If they both advertise, then firm A gets 250, firm B gets 250. If they both don't advertise, then firm A gets 500 and firm B gets 500. So the payoff on the right in any cell belongs to firm B. The payoff on the left belongs to firm A. So again, because advertising is meant to is effectively going to get people to switch brands and not pull in new people into the industry, then if they both advertise, and they'll kind of like cancel each other out, right? So they'll both wind up spending money, and so they'll be cutting down their profits. But they could get into an agreement and say, well, given that we're not actually going to have any effect over the industry, we should maybe just not advertise at all. So they could do that, save the money from the advertising, and they both wind up with higher profits. But of course, if somebody cheats on the agreement and the other one does not, if somebody chooses not to advertise, but then firm B does advertise, breaking the agreement, firm B will wind up stealing customers from A, and firm A will be hurt by that. And the same is the case if firm A is the one that cheats on the agreement to not advertise, while firm B does not advertise. And so again, you can see the parallels within with the prisoner's dilemma there in terms of this advertising game that these firms engage in. So we can again identify dominant strategy and the Nash equilibrium here. So firm A can either advertise or not advertise in response to firm B advertising, and what would it do? We choose to advertise, right? Because advertise will get a 250 versus 0. And in response to firm B not advertising, what should firm A do? Advertise, right? 750 is greater than 500. So regardless of what firm B does, firm A is going to advertise, which means that we have identified what type of strategy for firm A? A dominant strategy. Firm A has a dominant strategy to advertise. The game is symmetric, and so the same will be the case for firm B. If firm A chooses to advertise, firm B can either advertise or not advertise. Obviously, 250 is better than 0, so they would choose to advertise. If firm A were not choose to not advertise, then firm B can either advertise or not advertise, and obviously 750 is better than 500, and so they would choose to advertise. So regardless of what firm A does, firm B will choose to advertise, so firm A has a dominant strategy to advertise. Because both of them would choose to advertise is going to be the Nash equilibrium for the game. Here too, when each firm does what is rational from its own point of view, firms as a group do worse than if they had acted in concert. So again, you wind up with a worse outcome, just like in the prisoner's dilemma, than if they had just maintained their agreement and worked together, as is the case with the pricing game for the firms. So Congress passed a law forbidding the advertising of cigarettes on television as of January 1st of 1971. Its stated purpose was to protect people from messages that might persuade them to consume a product that's been proved hazardous to human health. The law has also had an unintended effect, which was to solve, at least temporarily, the prisoner's dilemma confronting American cigarette manufacturers. In the years before the law's enactment, cigarette manufacturers would spend more than $300 million advertising their products. The corresponding figure for the following year was more than $60 million smaller, and much of that difference translated into higher profits for the industry. But of course, in the succeeding years, competitive pressures have led cigarette manufacturers to increase their expenditures on other forms of advertising that remain legal, thereby eroding their profit windfall. All right, so when, as in a prisoner's dilemma, both parties have a dominant strategy, the equilibrium for the game occurs when each player has a dominant strategy. But there's many games in which every player does not have a dominant strategy, so you should be able to identify Nash equilibrium in any game, or even the multiple Nash equilibria that might exist. And the way to do that is to take the perspective of each player and consider what they should choose optimally in response to what their rivals may do. So taking the perspective of firm A, in response to firm B advertising, what should firm A do? Don't advertise, right? 750 is better than 300. In response to firm B not advertising, what should firm A do? Don't advertise, right? So don't advertise is a dominant strategy for firm A. In response to firm A advertising, what should firm B do? Advertise, right? Because 200 is better than 0. And in response to firm A not advertising, what should firm B do? Don't advertise, because 400 is better than 100. So we see that firm B does not have a dominant strategy, but that does not mean there is no Nash equilibrium for this game. The Nash equilibrias will occur wherever the optimal choices overlap on a game. So you might have a square where two squares where the choices overlap, and that would identify two Nash equilibria. In this case, the Nash equilibrium for this game happens in don't advertise, because that's the one spot that both chose in response to each other, and therefore that is the likely outcome to happen. So any other ones would cause one person to choose one thing, and then the other to choose something different, and then the other one to choose something different as a result of that. And so again, this is the only set of strategies where neither player has any incentive to deviate from that. If firm B doesn't advertise, firm A won't advertise, and if firm A doesn't advertise, firm B won't advertise. So neither player has any incentive to deviate from these strategies. Because there is only one Nash equilibrium in this game, then that is a likely outcome for this game. And again, it's all based on the payoffs and the strategies that people have. All right, folks, we are done with this today. Congratulations. We're not done with the chapter, so there won't be a homework this weekend. So you have a little bit of time. Use that time wisely. There's an open chapter mini paper submission option you can still use. Did I leave the next? Yeah, chapter 11's mini paper is due on Sunday night, right? Or Tuesday, or whatever it's due. It's due at some time coming up, so you have some time to write that paper this weekend. Make sure you do it. Don't leave the papers to the last moment. It's a bad idea. There's only so many options left. We're covering 2 chapters of last week, so that gets rid of 2. So the options are narrowing down for those of you that have been just leaving things to the last moment. And you don't want to lose out on those points that are just easy to get. So just make sure that you take care of things now. If